morning I would direct your attention, if you would, to the 27th Psalm. I'm going to focus on the last verse, but I think it's only appropriate that we read the entire Psalm, so you follow along with me. It's Psalm number 27, Psalm of David. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked came against me to eat up my flesh, my enemies and foes, they stumbled and they fell. Though an army may encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war may rise against me, in this will I be confident. One thing have I desired of the Lord, and that will I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in his temple. For in the time of trouble he shall hide me in his pavilion, in the secret place of his tabernacle. He shall hide me. He shall hide me upon a high rock. And now my head shall be lifted up above all my enemies all around me. Therefore I will offer sacrifices of joy in his tabernacle. I will sing, yes, I will sing praises to the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry with my voice. Have mercy also upon me, and answer me. When you said, seek my face, my heart said to you, your face, Lord, I will seek. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger. You have been my help. Do not leave me nor forsake me, O God of my salvation. When my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take care of me. Teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me in a smooth path because of my enemies. Do not deliver me to the will of my adversaries, for false witnesses have risen against me, and such as breathe out violence. I would have lost heart unless I had believed that would I see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And then this is where I want us to focus today. Wait, I say, on the Lord. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. May God add his blessing to his word this morning. I appreciated Richard's words, but I need to add just a little bit. Working with a couple of congregations in town, if I were on the outside looking in, this would be my first question, would be, I wonder how many from that first congregation went over to that second congregation. And that's a really good question. Interestingly enough, there's no relationship whatsoever. One is denominationally affiliated, one is independent, and the constituency of one has absolutely had really no correlation with the other in any way. So, when I think about that's interesting, because only God builds the church, and that's really what we're about today. By the way, the name Waypoint, I've got to tell you what it means. I like to fly airplanes every once in a while. And if you know anything about navigation, I'm sure several of you do, then a waypoint is very simply, by definition, a place on a journey where a traveler can adjust or change his course. And hence the mission of the church. A place on a journey where a traveler can adjust or change his course. And that's what we're all about today. We're here while you're in this interim period, and God is readying you as a congregation for whatever direction He's going to take you. And no one likes to wait. Waiting is not something that numbers among my favorite things. I need to tell you also at the very beginning that this is not one of those neat little 3-point sermons. So if you got a pencil out and you write 3 points, you're going to struggle because I can't find them. I look for them. I can't find the 3 points. Normally I stay pretty close to that. But let's talk about waiting today for a little bit. Waiting does not number among my favorite things to do. Nevertheless, I've spent a significant portion of my life in waiting for this. And I can think of a zillion experiences there. Let me just share a few of those. First and foremost, of course, I would think of waiting on our children to be born. I remember that well. Fortunately, neither one of them lingered long at the beginning. And that was good for my wife. It was also good for their dad-to-be. Because waiting's not my favorite thing, but I remember those moments. I remember waiting, believe it or not, long periods of time on other people's children to be born. I've got to tell you a little quick story there. In my first pastorate, when my wife and I concluded, we've been there for 3 years. They kind of scoot you in and out of your first pastorate because you've made so many mistakes. And as they, at the end of 3 years, I was 27 years old, and we were the middle-aged couple in the church. Get the idea? It was a very, very, very young congregation, and they were having children about as quick as you can imagine. Well, often, because those fathers were still in school, they were still training quite a young college undergraduate constituency, they would be working, and back in those days, you had to work third shift off from their second shift, and all of a sudden those babies would come second shift or third shift, and for some reason they couldn't get hold of dad, way before cell phones and all the rest of that. And I got a million calls, it seemed like, not really, but I got all kinds of calls from the hospital saying that Susie is here, or Sally is here, whatever the name, and we're unable to get hold of her husband, and she's frightened, and we're wondering if you would come and be with her. She's about to deliver her child, and that was before our children were born. And wow, this order kind of seems to be all messed up. That's how I started with that waiting business. I don't remember, as much as I loved serving, I don't remember enjoying the art of waiting. Years later, we were pastoring a church. I received a call one day, and they told me that a young lady and her brother had been playing in the yard. This was a relatively new couple to the church. We had no hospital in the community. We were about 18 miles away from the community, and they said, what we really need you to do is get here as quickly as possible and follow they followed the ambulance to the hospital because they were playing out in the yard, and the younger son threw a jar. Remember those jars, those horrible things? A jar up in the air, it came down, stuck in his sister's head, straight in her head, just pretty deep. And we're taking her to the hospital. Well, that didn't make a lot of sense to me. I thought, how do you survive that to begin with? The amazing part of that story is Dad had great sensibility, and he told Mom had Mom call the ambulance. They made it. Dad held the jar in place the whole time. They got there, the neurosurgeon removed it, and miraculously the young child was home in a week, doing just fine. Those waiting room experiences, I remember waiting on many occasions for people that had been brought into the community or brought into the hospital, and perhaps a stroke was in progress, and it was before they had the wonderful drugs that they do today to catch it, or perhaps before we were even aware that we could do that. And waiting with the family to see what the extent of the damage would be from that stroke. Those are horrible waiting times, and then often waiting simply for death. And waiting for the announcement from the physician that the battle was over. I remember those moments of waiting. Now, those are pastoral, or those are ministerial waiting. Let me give you some miscellaneous kinds of waiting. And I can think of several of those. Again, it was back to that first pastor. I was trying to be the guy that could get everything he wanted pastoring, and I thought all you had to do was ask. So we had a gentleman who was getting ready to assume a new position in the community. He was a pretty big name. And I thought, I'm young, doing a great job pastoring. I'll contact him early and see if he will be available to speak at our congregation. And I worked on the nicest letter you can imagine. He sent me back a letter that I had never received in my life at that point, but I learned that I would probably receive several. They're worded differently. And bottom line is, he told me, I may have saved the letter. He told me that he appreciated the opportunity, but he would place my invitation in his abeyance file. Better hear what? Now, simple terms. I'll place it in my waiting environment. And when I get ready to contact you, then I'll call you and I'll come and speak at your congregation. He never got ready. Many years later, I was pastoring another gentleman who had a very, very significant assignment. He was an executive president of many, many banks. And one day he was taken out of the community. I lost a wonderful church member during that time. And I asked him, I said, so exactly what's going on? Did they terminate you? Did you lose your job? And I mean, he had a big job. He said, no. I didn't lose my job. They told me that they're placing me in the executive bullpen. I think you understand that. It's called waiting. Some places I don't like to wait. One of them is not very far from here. If you work there, I'm really, really sorry. I really am. But the Department of Motor Vehicles is not a way that I ever enjoy. I've tried to figure out how to get everything I need over the years without having to go there. And I know most of it can be done today without going in there. But I've never enjoyed that waiting. Waiting in restaurants to be seated. I'm okay with that as long as the line's not too big. And if it's big, I'm ready to get a hamburger or something. Waiting for traffic lights, not a problem. But I've spent a lot of time doing that. And then I've lived in Elkhart for a lot of years, and I have absolutely no problem with this whatsoever, but my wife, you can kind of push her over the edge with this one. I like waiting on trains. She doesn't. Now, my wife teaches school. We live in Concord every day to teach, to cross the train. In fact, Janet does not like waiting on trains. If she were here, I'd say the same thing. She would be nodding her head. My only stipulation is if I'm going to wait, I want to be close to the front of the line because I like to hear the thing. And I've got that little boy thing. I want to roll the windows down and hear the engines roar and all the rest of that. But waiting. Let's shift gears for a moment. Let's talk about waiting on God. Waiting never seems to be productive. Yet if you venture very far into this experience called adulthood, then you've learned that waiting consumes a rather large portion of your life. Think about God's waiting room. Yes, I would like a little bit of freedom for a few moments. If you would kind of take a little allegorical visit to God's waiting room, if you would. And really no order about it whatsoever. But let me give you some examples of God's waiting room. I don't know what to call it. I guess we could call it the celestial waiting room. Does that sound right? I'm not quite sure what it would look like. When I think of waiting rooms, I think of a very large waiting room, and this one would have to be really large. Probably some kind of shiny floors, whether it's marble walls and marble floors, whatever, and just countless people sitting around the room, all waiting. And now and again, glancing at, and this is a real oxymoron, glancing at God's clock, whatever that looks like, and clearing their throats, we all do in waiting rooms, and just waiting for God to respond. They're waiting for God to keep His promise, waiting for God to speak, maybe waiting for God to answer. Waiting for God to heal. Perhaps it's waiting for God to act. And if you can get that far with your imagination, can you imagine them just kind of going around the room and you're bored and trying to figure out what's going on? You know, I look over in the corner and I see a guy over there and he's reading a magazine. He's reading a magazine on voting. It's interesting to me, and I asked him, anybody, what are you reading about? I'm reading this magazine on voting, and I'm waiting for something that they call rain. Never heard of it before. If they tell me it's going to come down, God says from the sky. I'm waiting on rain. You know his name. His name's Noah. Interesting conversation until we move to the next gentleman down the way a little bit. He's an old man. He's a very old man. Remember, no chronological, don't try to make this work chronologically anymore. Another old man. He's waiting. And his is kind of a peculiar kind of waiting. He's waiting there with his elderly wife. And you ask him what's going on. He said, well, God told me a long time ago that my wife would bear a child. She's heading toward 100 these days, and she, as you can see, she's well on the way. That just messes with my mind several different things. Really? You're waiting on your wife, who's getting toward 100 in her 90s, to have a child. Your first child. By the way, what's your name, Mr. Abraham? Abraham. Well, that one almost stopped me in my tracks. And you have to move from Abram to find someone else, and finally I find some gentleman who's absolutely double overriding and agreeing. What in the world is going on with the guy? He's groaning, and not only that, he's so ill you don't really want to get near him. And when you look at him, you're pretty sure you don't want to get near him because whatever it is that he has looks pretty contagious, and I kind of just want to stay away, at least, at least until you find a place where you can be down up and gloves and mask on, it'll work. But I'll just wait. And you get as close as you dare, you talk to him, and finally he utters out his name, and he says, my name is Joe. I'm waiting for God to heal. I'm waiting for God to restore. Okay? It's time to find someone who's not quite as pathetic. I move across the room and I find there an attractive young lady. And she's waiting to see the physician. We talk a little bit. She tells me what she's waiting on. She said, I'm here and I'm waiting. I'm not sure what he can do today, but I'm waiting on a promised husband. Really? What's your name? My name's Ruth. Quite a conversation until we move to the next one. His name's mine. His name's David. And young man, what are you waiting on? He said, well, can't you tell? He said, I am going to be royal. I'm waiting on my king. I have been promised a king. Really? God promised. Okay? Ambitious young guy. But the guy next to him is an elderly guy. He's kind of weeping and quietly wiping his eyes and the tears away. And he's waiting on some burned out city to be restored. His name's Jeremiah. He said, I'm just waiting. But then you see that optimistic guy at the end of the room. Every room has one of these. He's bubbling. He's excited. He's ready to go. He's ready to take on the world. And then you realize that he has on a prison guard. And you think, well, not just a prison guard, but he has an Egyptian prison outfit on. And you get closer to him, you talk to him, you say, what are you waiting on? Oh, this is just temporary. This is just God getting me ready for the next thing, because He has promised me this incredible career in leadership and in helping my family, and I'm just here waiting on God to kind of strike the right time. My name is Joseph, by the way. Well, you could go on in the room, but let me just give you one more. It's an elderly lady by the name of Anna. You can read her story in the book of Luke, the 2nd chapter. It reads, there was a prophetess Anna, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher. She was very old. She lived with her husband. I read this fast for a lot of years, and I slowed down this week when I read it. I don't know why I read it fast all the years, but listen to this waiting period. She lived with her husband for 7 years after her marriage, probably quite young, and then was a widow until she was 84. She never left the temple, but worshiped there night and day, fasting and praying, coming up to them. At that very moment, she gave thanks to God and spoke about the child to all who were looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem. She was waiting on the Christ child. Now, all of those above stories are the stories of waiting on God. My guess is that everyone in here could add a string to those. You can talk about the time that you have waited on God. That those times of waiting are not always the easiest, but nevertheless they're necessary, because in that waiting period, God begins to refine our listening skills and our faith skills and our trusting skills. It's an old hymn, and I remember the words well as a kid. We used to sing them, and it seemed like often. But it was an old hymn. It said, be not dismayed whate'er betide, God will take care of you. Yeah, He really does. In His time, in His way. This morning's lesson is really quite simple. And remember I told you I usually have 3 points. I didn't have 3 points today. But let me end with 3, okay? You can take as your conclusion here. And it's real simple. Number 1, God never forgets that you're out there waiting on Him to act. Forgetfulness is not a part of Him, it's not one of His attributes. God never forgets that you're waiting. Never. And secondly, your waiting may be the greatest way you can impact your world for Him. I don't like that. But your waiting may be the greatest way you can impact your world for Him. And number 3, be faithful, and you will likely affect the future in ways you cannot imagine. The Scripture says, wait for the Lord. Be strong. Take heart and wait for the Lord. Before we moved to Elkhart many years ago, we had the opportunity to live in the land of theologians, Oklahoma. Why you all laughing? Oklahoma. And there was one great theologian, in Oklahoma. If I should tell you his name before or after. It was not Will Rogers, by the way. But one great theologian, or no, I should say another great theologian. And as soon as we moved here, it's when he was really in his heyday. Simple story to wrap it up. And Garth Brooks, everyone everywhere was wanting to go to Garth Brooks concerts, and he was the rage. Now, not you people, nobody here would ever listen to country music, I'm confident, but in Oklahoma, they listened to a lot of it. Not to mention we lived from his home. So Garth Brooks was pretty popular. We moved here, and I thought, thank goodness I got my kids out of that. My kids are young. They're not going to grow up Okies. And if you're an Okie, I'm sorry. They're not going to grow up Okies, and they're not going to be in that environment. As soon as we moved here, all of a sudden, publicity is all over. Garth Brooks is coming another day. Oh, great. So my kids did this thing. They said, Dad, would you give us tickets? And I said, I don't know how to get tickets. Well, they did. They figured it out. And the way you get tickets is you have to go to this place, and it was at the Pierre Bryan Mall when there was one. And you've got to go in there, and you have to, if you did the same thing, you already know the story. You have to go in there to get the tickets. Well, I found out that you don't get the tickets. You wait in this long line to get a bracelet. I'm a pastor. It was a bright neon colored bracelet. To get a bracelet that you could wear for a week, so that when the tickets were available, the bracelet would get you into the waiting line. So I thought, okay, I'm getting this, the line for the line, okay. And I, sure enough, did that. I put that bracelet on, and spent a week doing this. You're kind of hard. I'm speaking as well. Make sure the last button was tight, and that was it. In time for the tickets, got in line right before the tickets were completely sold out. It was my spot, or I should say right after they were sold out, it was my spot. And I mean, you got to be kidding. I went through all this. Tickets are sold out. They opened up for another concert, sure enough, and I got tickets for my kids. They wanted to take their friends. I had ended up with 2 extra tickets. It was on a Sunday night. I pastored the Nan Street Church for years. Let me tell you something. Sunday evenings were sacred. And we had a Sunday evening service, and that Sunday evening service was just about as much work as Sunday morning, and just as important. And my kids wanted to leave that Sunday evening service so that they could go to that concert. Well, Dad's always had a little bit of a liberal permissive flair to him. I had absolutely no problem with it whatsoever. And got them out of there, and they went to the concert. The evening service is over. Normally we would go out to eat with a bunch of people in the church, but no one asked us to go out to eat. And my wife looked at me as we walked out of church, and she said, "You had 2 extra tickets, right?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, I'd be ashamed to waste them." I said, "Janet, you want to go to that concert?" "Well, I think we could probably get there and catch most of it." "You're kidding." She said, "No, let's go real quick." So we drove over there real quick. I remember walking into the Joyce Convocation Center. Walking up, we were in a hurry. I hadn't had time to take off my sport coat and tie. And we're walking up there. I said, "Look at me." She said, "Oh, forget it. We could just go in and say we've been there." We had an opening act that was just finished, and it was a young lady by the name of Martina McBride. And she said, "Well, just go in and we'll hear that." And I said, "Okay." I went in there and handed the gentleman my ticket, and honest to goodness, the gentleman said to me as he looked at the ticket, he said, "Oh, great." And I said, "What's wrong?" I shouldn't like my ticket. "Well, come on, follow me." And I thought, "Oh, wow, here we go." All the way up to the nosebleed section. I've already get here and everything. We walked in, and he said, "I'm not going to take you up there." He walked us out, and honest to goodness, sat us on the front seat right at the end, and Bart would come running in, get down on his knees, and slide his guitar almost into our lap. And this makes all the sense in the world. The thing I run from, I end up on the front row, right there. And it was a fun mission. let me give you this stab of theology. Pretty good. Keep in mind the country language. Garth said, sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers. Remember when you're talking to the man upstairs, that just because it doesn't answer doesn't mean it doesn't care. Some of God's grace is our unanswered prayers. Wait, I say,